If you haven't had a chance to read the newspaper lately, I'll fill you in. Oh, you don't know what a newspaper is? Okay, hang on. If you don't know what a newspaper is, just go Google it. Today we're going to talk about some password attacks, but it's relevant to the newspaper because if you didn't catch the news recently, there was a company named MyHeritage and 92 million of their customer login information was compromised. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is a security researcher found in the wild, so a place it's not supposed to be, a giant file of their users' login email addresses and the accompanying passwords. Now the passwords weren't stored in plain text, they were stored in what we call a hash or a hash value. So because they're stored as a hash value and not the plain text, MyHeritage is saying everybody's safe, it's all good, no need to worry. But it's a bit more complicated than that. So today we're going to dive in and look at what a hash is and also how you can bypass authentication just having the user's hashed password. Alright, we've heard this word a lot, so let's define it. What is a hash? So very simply, a hash is a unique output for a unique input. All that means is if I have plain text, which is human compatible and humans can actually read, and I put that plain text through a hashing algorithm, on the output, I'm going to get a random kind of string of numbers and letters and characters, right? So that is what we call the hash value. And the hash value is obviously, not human compatible. Humans can't read that or interpret that. Now, it's unique, right? So watch what happens. If I take a very similar plain text but change it just slightly, watch what happens. I put it through the same hashing algorithm, and I get a totally different hash output, right? So the other thing to remember about hashing and hash values is that there's only one way. So meaning if I have the hash values, I can't go back and discover the plain text from the hash. So I can't go this way. I can only go this way, right? So how this is used in authentication with or by companies like MyHeritage, what happens is they don't store your plain text password on their database. They just store your hashed password. So what that means is if you when you log in and say your password is password1 and you type it in, it's going to hash it. It's going to compare the hash that it just produced with the hash that's stored in its database. If they match, you are then authenticated, right? But if you mistype your password, then it's going to produce a different hash that does not match with what they have in their database, therefore you're not authenticated, okay? So that is kind of the setup of how hashing works, and remember what will happen in the MyHeritage attack is these values, these hash values were actually stolen and compromised, not the plain text passwords. What also was compromised along with that was the user login email addresses. So just with that information, just with the hash passwords, how can you actually discover the password from the hash? Well, that's what we're going to look at next. All right, so now we're ready for the follow-up question, which is, which tool or technique would actually allow an attacker to basically crack a hash password, meaning log in, just knowing the hash, or trying to discover the password from the hash, okay? So let's eliminate a few answer choices right off the bat. So we know it's not salting. Salting is actually an example of what we call a 180-degree answer choice. It's just the opposite or the reverse of the right answer. So salting actually saves passwords. It's a way to insert a random value at either your password or at your hash, and basically what you're doing is you're making the password more complex, longer, and you're defending it against brute force attacks that take a lot of time to actually try to crack. So I even just said the word brute force when I was talking about B, so if brute force is a form of attack, we know that this could be one of the right answer choices. Now let's try C, rainbow table. So rainbow table is actually a tool that is going to enable or make the brute force process happen faster. So it could be C. And SHA-1, we know it's not SHA-1. Why? Because SHA-1 is a hashing algorithm, right? It's an old one. It's not a very good one, but again, not what we're looking for here in this answer choice. It's definitely related, but not the right answer. So we're left between brute force and rainbow table. So this one is interesting because the wording of the question really matters. It says tools or techniques. It doesn't necessarily say attack type. So I would say a brute force is more of a general overall attack type, but a rainbow table is a specific tool that actually enables a brute force. So I think in this case, both could be right. Both are right in some ways, but C, rainbow table, is the better answer choice. So let me eliminate, or excuse me, let me erase the board. We already eliminated our answer choices, and we'll go into a little more deep detail about how a rainbow table works. Okay, so now that we know what a rainbow table is, let's actually look at how it actually helps with this password cracking process. So really, you need to understand the context of when a rainbow table would be helpful. So just like in the MyHeritage situation, the attacker has the hashed passwords. That's very important, right? That means they actually have this giant database or file of all your hashed passwords, but nothing else. So it really follows a three-step process after that. So the first thing that they do is they guess the password. So you want to guess the password so you can then hash it. So the next step is to hash the guessed password. And then once you have those hashes and of your guessed passwords, and you have the hashes of the database on the other end, what do you think you do? Exactly, compare them. You compare the hashes, and if any hashes match, well, you go back and you look at what password you guessed, and then that is the user's password to help them actually authenticate. But it actually, this is kind of gets even more fun, it's not necessarily the user's passwords. It's just a simple input that's going to produce the same output or the same hash as what the user's password actually did. Now you're saying that doesn't make any sense because you said it was unique, right? There's only one output for one input. Well, that's only with the good modern hashing algorithms. So what we have there is what we call a collision, where basically a different input is going to produce the same output. So two different inputs produce the same output. That is not good. In cryptography, that's what we call a collision. But remember I was talking about SHA-1? SHA-1 is a type of hashing algorithm that actually produce a collision. So it really depends on what type of algorithm MyHeritage actually used to hash their passwords, and it depends on a lot of other factors as well. So the thing to remember about this whole process is that it's time consuming. It takes both a lot of time and processing power for attackers to actually carry out this process. So what a rainbow table is basically a way to speed up this process. How does it actually speed it up? Well, it's a list of pre-computed most common passwords with their hashes, right? So imagine what you could do with that list. If you already have that list, you don't have to guess passwords. You don't have to actually hash the guess passwords, right? And a lot of rainbow tables can actually do this program for you, where it actually compares the hashes. So again, it speeds up the process because it's a pre-computed list of the most common passwords and those hashes, and then all you have to do is run a program that's actually going to compare it. So that's what a rainbow table is, that's how it works, and that's how it actually speeds up this very common hash guessing, password guessing process. Okay, so keep your eye on the MyHeritage attack. I have a feeling the story is not over, and if anything comes up in the meantime, we'll talk about it next week on QTNA.